Paul and Jordana, so yesterday wasn't much fun, and it's kind of morbid to talk about, but I had my will revised.
Are you planning on dying?
Tweaked. You know what? Every day is a gift. I hope I'm around for a few more good years. But
the fact is, that's the inevitable end. We're all going to die, folks.
Well, yeah. And again, nobody wants to think about this. Nobody wants to dwell on this. But it's something that we all need to think about. And even if you don't have, maybe in your mind, I don't have enough money saved up, so why should I bother?
Right.
Well, the question is, do you have kids? Because if you have kids, you might want to specify who you want the guardians to raise your kids to make sure that none of that is left to chance.
Sure.
And the other thing, by the way, thank you to Lowell Storts over at Stinson for being patient with me, some changes with my business. Just wanted to make sure that that was reflected in my will. But the other thought that I had, Prince.
Yes.
Earlier,
oh my gosh.
a couple of days ago, we talked about the Prince store at the airport at MSP International. If Prince was alive today, would he be sanctioning stores
The
and
answer's no.
merchandise and
Nope.
tours of Paisley Park? I doubt it. I didn't know Prince personally. Everything I know about him, not in a million years.
Nope.
But again, he did not have a will.
That's right.
So that's echoing in my brain as well. And it turns out only 4 in 10 American adults have a will or a living trust. 78% of millennials and 64% of Generation Xers, that's you, Jor, do not have a will.
I have one.
You do?
I do. I have one because my first husband and I, when we got pregnant, we we're going to have a child, so we needed to get our affairs in order. And then when I got a divorce, I needed to change the estate plan to, make the whatever money's left, whatever money I don't spend, go to the right places where I choose.
But your plan is to spend every last dime.
Penny.
Let
Kids,
them
you're
earn
getting
it.
nothing.
Let them earn it. It's so much more satisfying when they earn it. Matt Guttman is an attorney at Mullen and Guttman. Matt, thanks for joining us today on CCO.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Jordana.
And Matt did my estate plan. So, Matt,
I'm so sorry, Matt.
Well, I had a great experience with Matt, so I invited him to come on because he made it really easy for me. And, when you go, you're thinking about your death. I mean, you have to answer really hard questions. And you did, Matt, I know, did a great job with me. So thanks for hanging with us today.
Hey, Matt,
Thank you.
Should younger people, what is sort of the age or the circumstances where you should get serious about having some estate planning or crafting a will?
Well, I think you mentioned it best when you said that if you're having children or you're thinking about having children, having a will that names guardians so that the people you want to take care of your children can take care of your children, that's a really great thing. Making sure that that's in place makes a huge difference, even if you never need it, and that's the hope is that you'll never need it, but
Exactly.
you never know.
So basically when you get pregnant or when your baby is born, then you need to have an arrangement.
Well, I also like to say that anybody over the age of 18 should have certain incapacity documents, powers of attorney, and healthcare directives for sure. The will becomes more important when you start to accumulate assets or if you have children. But anybody over age 18 should have some documents. But if you have children or you're planning on children, that will is vitally important.
Some of the excuses that people give is, well, I don't have enough assets or, I don't have time to get around to it. What would you advise specifically? And is it expensive to create a will?
Well, the prices of wills vary dramatically depending where you go, but getting a will in place shouldn't be a huge burden, and it shouldn't be the kind of thing that you just stop and give up on because you may not have a lot of money or you may not be sure of who to name as a guardian. And unfortunately, we see a lot of people who come to us when their youngest child or their oldest child reaches 18 because they couldn't figure out who they wanted as a guardian. So figuring that out at the front end is much better.
Yeah, and they just got lucky. Nothing happened to them, thank God.
Yeah, planning for being lucky is not the way to plan.
That's sage advice.
I'm writing that down, Matt. That's good.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, all right. So you have kids. You're thinking about having kids. Even if in your mind, you don't have a lot of assets, it is a good idea to have a will in place across the board?
Absolutely. Having a will at a minimum is what you need to do to name those guardians if you're having children. Now, some people will do a living trust or a revocable living trust.
And what's the difference?
Well, a will is designed to go through probate, meaning the court gets involved in settling someone's estate. With a living trust, you're trying to avoid that. But if you have minor children, there's going to be a court proceeding to name guardians if you pass away and those children are still minors. So if you do a revocable living trust, you're still going to have a will that would name guardians for minors, so you still have both. But if you're just starting out, you're accumulating assets and accumulating children, you might very well think, hey, it's a good idea to get a will in place and name those guardians. And also make sure that there are provisions in that will that create a trust for your children so that the money is managed in a way that you would want if you actually pass away.
Can you do this online, Matt? Are there services online, and should we be wary of them, or are there decent services online?
Well, I mean, there are definitely people who do this online.
I know you make a living not doing it online, but, this is for everybody. Maybe people with, like you said, not a lot of assets, not a lot of money, but they want to make sure their child is taken care of.
Yeah, some people do this online. I've seen a lot of issues with estate plans online. I definitely believe it's better to find someone that you know or someone that you trust to help you with this. And again, it doesn't have to be a fancy document, but it should be a document that kind of carries out your wishes. So for sure, people do it online, and that's okay. It's always a good idea to have an attorney review it, because what you put in online is only as good as the information that you have and what you understand. So sometimes people do their own plans, and they don't know that they've made a mistake. I absolutely saw a couple who came to me who were both very smart, and they did a plan online on one of the online programs, and they inadvertently cut out one of their children. So they disinherited one of their children.
Okay.
Thankfully, they didn't pass, but we caught that, which was a good thing.
Yeah.
And you can tweak the will as your circumstances change. You may change your mind about certain things. You may want to be more generous, less generous, whatever. The other thing, Matt, what happens if there is no will? And let's say you have significant assets. You got a few $100,000 equity in your house. Talk about when things go to probate.
Well, one of the common misconceptions, though, is when people do a will, they think that there's not going to be the need for a probate. And in reality, the purpose of the will is to go to probate. So that's the most common misconception out there, is that if you do a will, there won't be a probate.
What does that mean, go to probate? Define that.
Probate is a court proceeding where the court will actually review the will that you did, or if you don't have a will, they'll look over the application where you're asking them to appoint someone to settle things and make sure that the right people are appointed. The court will actually review a will and kind of approve it, and then give someone authority to act on behalf of the person who died. And that's a court process. It takes time. It costs money. Sometimes it leads to aggravation.
Right. Basically, it's out of your control, right?
Well, I mean, somewhat out of your control. I mean, I don't want to scare people about probate, but it's definitely a process, and it requires having somebody help you go through it and make sure you do it the right way. And but it is not a scary process. It's just a process that you need to go through to make sure that the will is approved and give you the authority to act on behalf of the estate.
So do you recommend the living trust instead for young people?
Well, for most young people, we try to steer them towards wills because their primary concern is often naming a guardian. And as they accumulate more assets, often we will then move them or encourage them to think about a living trust, because then they avoid probate. But typically, when you have little kids, your number one goal is to make sure they're taken care of and that there's a guardian. So the will is okay for that, but the older the kids get and the more assets you have, it's often more appropriate to have a living trust.
And a heads up, it changes. I got when I got a divorce. Nobody plans to get a divorce. When you got a divorce, you have to change all of that, because obviously your spouse is named in your first will or your trust or whatever it is. And if you want to change it up, you have to make sure you take control of that.
And the person you want to be your guardian, God forbid you and your spouse both go at the same time, you should probably tell that person in advance.
Oh, absolutely. You should let them know. And
not surprise them.
Yeah, don't surprise
them. My
kids.
kids.
For sure. But you also should have a backup. I like having a first choice and a second choice because you never know. I'm a big baseball fan, so I talk about a batting order. So I think having a batting order in place makes a lot of sense.
And I know people don't like to do this because you have to ask them questions. If you die this, if you die that, if you both die, then what? Like, these are hard questions
It's
to
morbid,
grapple
yeah.
with. It's a little personal, and and that's, I think, why people avoid it, because they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to have to make those kind of decisions. But I know from personal experience, having it done and knowing that things were in order just in case, that gave me great
You
peace of
sleep a
mind.
little better
Yeah,
at night,
that gave me great
knowing
peace of
your
mind.
kids are going to be okay.
Right. And by the way, you're getting all my kids.
Really?
Yeah, so
well,
just a
that's swell. God.
I had to tell him. I had
Matt,
to tell him that.
Thank you for helping us out here today with some great information. Matt Guttman from Mullen and Guttman. Appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks, Jordana.
Thanks,
You
Matt.
bet, Matt.
Except Maddox. Maddox can go to Dan. They would get along great.
Yeah.
They play baseball together. You know, Dan would let him eat all the sugar he wanted, so that'd be good. You're getting Maddox.
Oh,
buddy.
absolutely. It would be great.
They'd be great.
Again, not a fun topic, but probably a necessary topic, right?
Absolutely.
You want to be responsible adults. You should at least think about this
And
stuff,
you think that it's
right?
something for old people. It is not something for old people. You have to do it while you're young and while your kids are young, because those are the people you have to protect.
Yep.
So I get it. Has to be done.
All right. When we come back, an update on Minnesota's farm crop. Corn and beans, it got in late. How are we doing? And is it really going to be 90 in time for the 4th of July?
Woohoo!
That's next.